This video is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com and GatheringMagic.com, your place to explore the game.
Hi, my name is Chris, and this is my Odric Master Tactician deck. So here it is, Odric Master Tactician. Let's just go ahead and take a quick closer look at him and basically what he does. I like to call him Captain No Blocks because that's basically what his ability does. Whenever he attacks with at least 3 other creatures, you get to choose how creatures block this combat. That means you can choose whether or not your opponent's creatures block, if at all, which is usually how you're going to use Master Tactician. Is you're going to basically have him attack with a bunch of creature tokens or other like really cheap creatures, and as soon as you turn them sideways, you know, they're going to get through for all that damage. Normally, it wouldn't. This kind of theme deck wouldn't work, but Odric just enables this kind of fun kind of trick on the game by manipulating how combat is dealt. So in that sense, it's really powerful. 9 times out of 10, you're going to basically let everything get through, but there are going to be some instances where you can actually force your opponent to block creatures that you have that are stronger than the things they have, and force them to use that as a pseudo removal to get rid of things in play too, which is also very useful. So let's just go ahead and take a quick look. This is a kind of soldier slash heroic themed weenie deck. They're the most expensive card you're going to see in this deck is going to be 4 converted mana cost of 4, including Odric. So everything else is going to be 4 or less, or going to have X costs on them, so you can theoretically play them for 4 or underneath, which really makes this a very hasty and quick deck. You just want to get creatures out quickly and kill your opponent with Odric and those other creatures to get that trigger. First off, there are 35 lands in this deck. Of those, we have 25 plains, so I'm going to go ahead and take those away right now. There we go. We have Benalia. It enters the battlefield tapped, and it lets you scry one. Useful for kind of sifting through that deck a little bit. Karoo, bounce land, but it taps for colorless and a white in your colors. Very useful. Secluded Steppe for cycling. Foreboding Watchtower. You can turn this into a 1/5 soldier, which again sticks with the theme of the soldier kind of sub-theme of the deck. Emeria, the Sky Ruin. One of the more all-star cards in this deck in terms of lands. Basically, if you have 7 or more lands in play, and because we have 25 of them, that's going to be really easy to get to. You can return a target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield every single upkeep, which is really useful, especially if the game's been going on a little bit longer, you're playing multiplayer, you've had a lot of creatures removed from play, you're going to, all of a sudden, those creatures are going to slowly start to come back into play. Next we got Temple of the False God. Terrain Generator to kind of ramp the deck a little bit, and speed things up a bit. Arcane Lighthouse to help you with removal and to get through for some of those, deal with some of those nasty hexproof creatures. Ghost Quarter to remove any of those threatening lands in play. And finally, Maze of Ith. Maze of Ith is here predominantly to deal with creatures that you can't block from combat that your opponent's swinging at you with. Predominantly flyers. There's not a lot of flyers in this deck because it is a soldier-themed deck, so flyers can be kind of a headache in this deck. Maze does help immensely with that and helping you kind of deal with those threats and prevent them from getting through for damage to kind of continuously let you work your game. So very useful card in this deck. Next we're on to the Instant and Sorceries package. Again, as I mentioned, there is a kind of, I don't know if I've mentioned this yet, but there is a kind of a heroic sub-theme as well in this deck. So a lot of the cards that we have in here are going to be able to trigger that heroic ability. God's Willing is, in my opinion, probably one of the best cheap one-costed drop spells you can use in this deck, if you're familiar with the Theros block and how heroic works. Basically, if you target a creature with a spell, it's going to get a +1/+1. and that's going to slow a +1/+1 counter, and it's going to progressively increase the strength of your creatures. God's Willing, you're usually going to use that in response to removal. You're going to give you protection from that spell, and it lets you scry, so you're going to also trigger that heroic all at once. Really, really useful. There are a lot of enchantments in this deck, and Ethereal Armor as well is going to also trigger that heroic ability, so this card can get outlandish and all for one. Ajani's Presence. Strive cost will also trigger heroic, and I have several Strive cards in this deck. It gives all as many times as you pay into it, it's going to give those creatures +1/+1 and indestructible. It can be used in response to removal. It can also be used to just kind of power up your creatures to get through for extra damage. All around useful multi-use spell. Launch the Fleet. In my opinion, probably one of the best 1-drop card I have in this deck. As many times as you pay 1 into it for as many creatures as you choose, but you're going to basically get an extra 1/1 soldier tapped and attacking. And if you have any enchantments on the board, they're going to buff those tokens as soon as they come in tapped and attacking. You're going to be able to do a ton of damage. I have won many a games with just casting a Launch the Fleet and attacking with a few creatures. Next up is Bonds of Faith. Again, we'll trigger that heroic, but this card has got a lot of multi-uses to it, which really is why it's in the deck. Because this is a soldier theme, most of those soldiers are humans as well. And so 9 times out of 10, you're going to be able to use that on your creatures to give that +2/+2. And more often than not, your opponent's not going to have humans. So you can also use it very similar to a pacifism to make it so your opponent can't attack or block with a creature that's threatening, like a flyer, for example. So all around, again, a multi-use spell that you can use based off the situation when you need it. Next up, we have Phalanx Formation. Again, we'll trigger that heroic, and this is one of those more powerful Strive cards. This is kind of a finisher, game ender. When you pay that extra Strive cost into a bunch of creatures, you're going to be able to get double strike for all those creatures, and really will rack up the damage. Again, really useful for killing off your opponent. Next up, Gift of Immortality. Just lets you recur a creature back and forth. It is not the necessarily best return recursion ability, but basically means that if your opponent wants to remove a creature, they have to do it within that little gap of upkeep after it's been returned before Gift of Immortality reattaches. So it does give a small window where it can be removed, but 9 times out of 10 I find that most people don't have 2 answers back to back where they can actually use that ability unless you're playing in multiplayer. All around, very useful. Shielded by Faith is going to give Indestructible, again triggering that heroic. And off into the token generators, we have Raise the Alarm. Spirit Bonds, and you can also sacrifice those spirits that you're producing to give target creature Indestructible. Mobilization, soldiers get vigilance and they produce soldiers. Timely Reinforcements. Captain's Call. And Unified Strike. Again, we're soldier themed, so this spell is incredibly powerful. It lets you remove a target attacking creature from the game if its power is less than or equal to the number of soldiers in play. Usually, a ton of soldiers. Disenchant. Pretty straightforward for that removal. Grasp of Fate. This is basically a Banishing Light or Oblivion Ring, except it's got multi-use. You can use it on multiple players for however many players you're playing with. So really useful because it can let you hit many threaded targets on the board. So for that reason it's in here, on the off chance that you're playing multiplayer. Marshal Coup. Again, another powerful board wipe, but if you pay 5 into the X, you're going to get 5 soldiers. Very useful. Wrath of God. Dawn to Dusk. You can use one or both, which is also really useful. You can destroy an enchantment, and you can also return an enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand. Face Reward, one of the other really powerful recursion spells. You're going to use this usually in response to a board wipe after everything's been blown up. Lets you return all those permanents back to the battlefield. And here we got some of the little buffing enchantments I have in the deck. Crusade for 2 white, gives all your white soldiers +1/+1. Glorious Anthem does the exact same thing, except it's for 1 more. Spear of Heliod, again giving that +1/+1, and it lets you destroy target creature that dealt damage to you this turn. If you pay it, you're willing to pay 2 white and a colorless. Very useful removal. Marshal's Anthem. It's going to let you return things. It's also going to give a +1/+1, so it's got multi-uses as well. Again, sticking to those multi-use themes, really powerful in Commander, any card that can do several things. Dictate of Heliod gives all your stuff +2/+2, and it has flash. Off to our artifacts. Soul Ring needs no explanation. Explorer Scope. Really cheap, powerful equipment in this deck. You can pay 1 to play it and equip 1 to equip, and it lets you basically get extra lands into play and kind of ramp the deck a little bit. Swifty Boots. Again, no explanation needed. Konda's Banner. This card's really powerful, especially when you use it on Odric. It's going to give, basically it's another all-around buffer. Any creatures that share a color are going to get a +1/+1 with Odric if you're choosing Odric, and any creatures that share a creature type are also going to get an additional +1/+1. So it really can just spread out a bunch of counters over a ton of creatures, especially if you have a decent amount of board presence. Next up we have Chariot of Victory. 3 to play, not too bad. First strike, trample, and haste for equip 1. All around great card. I think also the Chariot kind of fits in the theme with soldiers. It sees soldiers using a Chariot. Next up we have Temple Bell for the card draw. And Godsend, the all-star equipment of this deck. And I think it's kind of an interesting interaction when you use it with Odric, because you can pay that equip 3 to equip it to any creature if Odric's in play. Odric, if you want to be, what really doesn't matter. And you can, because you get to choose how blocks are declared, you can force your opponent to block a creature equipped with Godsend, which is going to exile that creature. There was one case where I was playing against somebody that was using a Aetheros God of Passage deck that basically with the Shadowborn Apostle theme where you cheat demons into play with the Shadowborn Apostles, and I forced him to block one of the Shadowborn Apostles with the Godsend, and when that happened, all of a sudden half his deck became unuseful. Really powerful card when used correctly, and lets you kind of get that exile feature off, and +3/+3 is really powerful. The one artifact and /tutor enchant thing I have in here, Steelshaper's Gift, pretty straightforward for 1, really powerful. And off to our creature package. I have Favored Hoplite, again with the heroic ability. Nyxborn Shieldmate, it has Bestow, so you can use it as an enchantment as well as play it as a creature. So it has those multi-uses, and it's a human and a soldier, all around great card. Soldier of the Pantheon. Doom Traveler will replace himself with a spirit when he dies. Hero of Iroas, again, heroic, and will also reduce the cost of all those auras for 2. Alarin Skyguard, a flyer, and he also has heroic, useful. Phalanx Leader. If you target him with a spell, all your creatures are going to get a +1/+1. Again, and that's a counter, so it's not going to go away. Aurical Outrider. Not necessarily, I think, the best card for this deck, but it is a human soldier, so it does fit in theme. And the fact that you can level it up to just 4 and get a 3/10, in my opinion, with Vigilance, is a useful card nonetheless. Sometimes you need a big blocker, and that's basically why Outrider is here. Fencing Ace, double strike. A Quarter Paladin with Battlecry. If you're unfamiliar with Battlecry, it just basically means any other creature that's attacking is going to get a +1/+0 until end of turn when it attacks. So again, will increase the amount of damage that you're dealt, and because you're attacking with a lot of creatures, really powerful ability. Daring Skyjack. Excuse me, I said that incorrectly. If it attacks with at least 2 other creatures, you're going to get flying out of it. Again, useful card. Relic Seeker. Lets you search for an artifact. I mean, again, it's just basically another searching method. You're probably going to use search for Godsend or Swift Boots with this. Knight of the White Orchid. When it comes into play, if an opponent controls more lands than you, you're going to be able to get a Plains card and put it into play. And that's untapped. Really useful. Precinct Captain. Whenever he attacks, he's going to put a 1/1 white soldier into play. God-Favored General. I love this card, and normally I think this card would be garbage in any other format, but with Odric and in this deck, it is a all-star. The Inspired trigger is going to get through almost every single time if you're able to activate Odric's ability with God-Favored General, and you're going to produce a ton of soldiers real quickly. This card is great. Grand Abolisher. Basically, when it's in play, your opponent has to just sit there and wait for you to finish your turn. Really useful. Aegis of the Gods gives you hexproof. Kind of prevents any of those force you to sacrifice things. Prevents you from being kind of enchanted. All around useful. And it's a human and a soldier, and it counts for an enchantment, so it'll also work again for the Ethereal Armor. Bastion Protector. Basically, it's just there to protect Odric. Gives him +2/+2 and indestructible when it's in play. Attendant Knight comes into play, you get a 1/1 white soldier. Mentor of the Meek. Almost everything in this deck is power 2 or less, so you're going to be able to draw a ton of cards off the Mentor if you have it in play. Field Marshal gives all your soldiers +1/+1 in first strike. Mirren Crusader gives you double strike and protection from black and from green. Now starting to get into some of the more powerful creatures. Bramaz, King of Oreskos. If you're unfamiliar with him, amazing card. If he's attacking, you're going to get a 1/1 white soldier with Vigilance attacking as well. And if he blocks, you're also going to get a 1/1 white soldier blocking as well. Again, a really powerful token producing creature. Crusader of Odric. His power and toughness are equal to the number of creatures you control. Intrepid Hero. Destroy a target creature with power 4 or greater. All around, I think this is a really powerful card for two reasons. One, you're going to be dealing with a lot of creatures that are stronger than the creatures you have in play, so having a means to just tap and remove a creature is great. Plus on top of that too, if Intrepid Hero is stolen from you, there are very rare cases where you're going to see a creature that's going to be power 4 or greater on your board. So in that case, it's also can't be really used against you too much. So good card. There are cases where that's not the case, but it's harder to use against you than it is for you to use against your opponents. Mirror Entity. This is a shapeshifter, but because he's a changeling and counts for every single type of creature type, he also counts for a human and soldier. And you can pay X into it to give +X/+X to all, and all creatures are going to gain all creature types till end of turn. It's really just there for the +X/+X. All the other creature type stuff's kind of not as important. Sometimes it'll work for some of the other, like Konda's Banner and things like that. But needless to say, really powerful card in this deck and works well. Frontline Medic. It has that battalion trigger, so whenever it attacks with at least 2 other creatures, it's going to get that indestructible. And you can sacrifice Frontline Medic as well to counter target spell with X converted mana cost unless its controller pays 3. So if they're paying a big spell, you can basically counter it really well. And I mean, it's just again a great card with lots of multi-uses and helps you protect creatures. Con Ming, Sleeping Dragon. Lets all your soldiers get +1/+1. Dawnbringer Charioteers, one of the only couple of flyers I have in this deck, but it has that heroic lifelink and a flyer, and it's a 2/4. All around, very useful card. And Hero of the Bladehold, probably the most powerful creature in my opinion in this deck. It has Battlecry again, so it's going to be able to buff all those creatures that you have that are attacking. And whenever it attacks, you're putting 2 1/1 white soldier creature tokens onto the battlefield, tapping and attacking as well. Really, really, really good card in this deck. And finally, the last card is the only Planeswalker I have in here, Elspeth Knight Errant. All around great card in this deck. You can +1 to give him a soldier, +1 to give him a target creature +3/+3 in life and flying till end of turn. And that -8 basically means anything you have on the board is going to be can only be exiled, so or forced to be sacked. All around, really, really good. Thanks for watching CMDR Decks. Please be sure to subscribe and favorite.